Before we get started, I want to take this opportunity to ask a quick question. How many invoices do you process per month? You can post these answers in the chat. We'll give you a chance to go through those. I know for clients that I work with, it's typically in that 75 to 300-400 invoices, but I know that we have some customers that are doing thousands of invoices a month. So you can imagine when there is pain in AP, it only gets magnified when there's those higher volumes.
Okay, the poll is now closed. 60% said 76 to 150, and the remaining 30% said 151 to 300.
Okay, all right, thank you. That's quite a range there. Well, I want you to think about the answers that you just gave in light of the figures we looked at on the previous slide. You can start to crunch the math in your head regarding the amount of time and dollars spent processing all those invoices. Okay, let's get right into it. So we're here to talk about the accounts payable pain points, holding your team back, the things that sometimes can make AP a real P in the A. I'll give a couple seconds here to cringe at my joke, but let's get into them. So our first pain point is a big one, manual data entry. According to Level Research, 71% of companies point to manual data entry and related process inefficiencies as their top pain point. What that tells us is that manual data entry sucks, and most people know it. But why is it such a pain point? Well, a lot of finance professionals are making important business decisions based on inaccurate financials. According to Blackline Research, an incredible 41% of finance pros blame manual data entry for those dodgy numbers. Sage Research has shown that accountants spend up to 57% of their day entering data, leaving little room for anything else. And here's one final stat to hit you with. Despite all of this, 86% of SMEs still enter their invoice data by hand. So manual data entry is a major problem, and yet little is done about it. So we're going to jump into our demo now and show you how Quadient AP can help address each of these pain points around manual data entry and leave you with hours back in your day. Before we get into the data entry, how we're reducing the data entry there, I'll give you a quick overview of what we're seeing on the screen. So on the left-hand side, we have our 4 core modules: expenses, purchase orders, invoices, and payments. At the top of the screen, we have our workflow tab. So everything's going to start out at create or in progress, and then graduate eventually to archived. The middle of the screen is the workspace or list view of invoices, essentially a mirror of your AP inbox. And on the left here, we have our status filters, custom filters, and our org units. These org units are going to be a mirror of your organizational structure in Intacct. So in our example, we have several entities, and then within our green bean co-entity, if I want to drill into a particular subunit like sales or marketing, I can see the org unit within that entity. So when it comes to getting invoices actually into the tool and processing those invoices, there's a few different ways. Anything that comes in electronically will to an AP inbox, for example, we'll use auto forwarding rules to pull them into this in progress tab. Anything that comes in via hard copy, we can either take a photo with our mobile app, or we can throw them in the scanner, upload the, let's say, 20-page PDF here, and then split them out one by one. If we have a page or invoice that's multiple pages, it's as simple as dragging and dropping. So now the invoices are actually in the tool. This is where we can get into the data capture and coding. So you'll see we'll pull the invoice image in, and all of this information here in the system, like the vendor list, the GL list, any list in the tool here, is simply a mirror of what's in your Sage Intacct. If there was a PO, we'll also match the invoice to the PO. And this is where the data capture takes place. So for most AP teams, the most time-consuming step is entering the invoices into Intacct. And so typically that's going to be the vendor, date, invoice number, totals, due dates, taxes. In some cases, it could be project IDs or other lists. From here, we're going to capture all this information for you. So all this header information like the vendor, date, and invoice number, and so on, is going to be captured for you. And at this point, most automation tools actually are pretty good at this. Where we're going to be a little different is with recurring invoices and the line items table. So for most folks, typically the people I talk to, it's around 50 to 60% of their invoices are recurring, where the coding is the same depending on the vendor. So let's say Cavallo, for example, usually their invoices are coded to computer software. Our smart code feature here in the top right will remember the coding for recurring invoices, meaning the GL is already selected. Some automation tools can do that. Now, where we're going to be different than pretty much every other tool is in the line items table. So if you have invoices that have 10, 20 line items, where each line item is coded to a different GL and potentially a different org unit, allocated differently that way, we can actually code the entire line items table for you using description and vendor. So for example, we might have a line item that says Motorola. We know that Motorola combined with Cavallo equals 1881 computer software. It might be another line item that, let's say, contains tables, chairs, so on. The system will code the line item table for you. So this is the step where I would say most people I talk to, this is the most time-consuming step, is actually getting the invoice information in. And here we save an estimated 80 to 90% of the time on the actual data capture. So let's explore our second pain point now, the approval process. If you spent days knocking on doors and chasing signatures, you're not alone. We surveyed over 200 AP professionals and found that they, on average, spend 20% of their time managing approvals. Add that time to the manual data entry, and we're up to 77%. We're already running out of the day. And complex approval processes gum up the works. It can take up to 45 days to process an invoice, pushing the average cost per invoice past $15. Delays in the approval process have knock-on effects too, like late payments, missed early payment discounts, and damaged vendor relationships. Now I'll walk you through how Quadient AP helps speed up the approval process. So once we submit the invoice for approval, that's going to trigger the approval routing that we set up in the back end. So I'll show you kind of two ways to look at this. The first is from the user perspective. So let's say I'm a department head and I log into the system and I have my list of invoices that need to be approved. I'll see this list of invoices. On the right here, I'll see the channel progress of where in the approval channel the invoice actually is. And then I can drill into each individual invoice. So I'll see the invoice details, the coding, any prior comments and approval history. And then it's super simple. Thumbs up approve is going to push the invoice forward. Thumbs down reject will trigger a comment. So that way AP teams can cut down on the back and forth of why exactly an approval or an invoice wasn't approved. We also offer a mobile app, and I would say most of the clients I talk to actually use the mobile app to approve and reject invoices on the go. Now I'll jump into the back end to show you how we actually set these channels up. So I can create these approval channels for invoices, POs, payments, and expenses. But for today, I'll create one for invoices. So I'll edit this channel called Mass Approvals. And typically common things that are going to be used for, or common criteria that are used for approval routing are things like dollar amount and vendor. Could be other things as well. But we'll start with the dollar amount. So let's say I want to have any invoice that's between $2,500 and $10,000. And let's make it match to a PO. And we'll also use org unit as a criteria. So we've got invoice threshold of 2,500 to 10 grand, a PO match, and then org unit as our next criteria. We'll add the org unit. So this is going to apply to IT purchases and warehouse. And then we simply select the approvers we want to go to. So right now, this channel is set up to only go to Sally, our AP clerk, but I'm going to add our controller, Tom, in here, as well as our warehouse manager and our IT guy, Josh. So because I want this to apply to both warehouse and IT, I'm actually going to put Josh and Janice in a group approval so either of them can sign off. And in summary, invoice comes in, it's between 2,500 and 10 grand, matched to a PO, and belongs to warehouse or IT. It's going to go to the following people. So this channel, right, we use 2 dimensions. We could make this even more complex if we wanted by adding GLs or from a particular vendor, or we can make it super simple. Totally up to the client. So that wraps up the actual approval routing. We'll get back into the demo. Okay, so let's consider our final AP pain point, a lack of data visibility and reliability. So as it stands, finance executives are not confident in the accuracy of their cash flow data. And according to Blackline, 49% have multiple issues with data accuracy, while an incredible 98% think that they could have more confidence in their data visibility. Experian research has shown that businesses believe 32% of their data to be inaccurate, while 66% of their finance employees think their CEOs have made bad decisions, made business decisions based on incomplete or inaccurate data. Finally, according to research from the University of Hawaii, an incredible 88% of spreadsheets contain inaccuracies. So it's no wonder that finance professionals aren't exactly happy with the state of their financial information. I know for me, it's like 100% of my spreadsheets contain inaccuracies, but so you might have noticed that we're back to where we started. Manual data entry is time-consuming, inaccurate, and error-prone, leaving finance leaders to rely on bad financial information. It's the opposite of a virtuous cycle. So let's jump back into the solution to show you how we can make your AP data more accessible and make it easy to find exactly what you were looking for in a few clicks. So there's a couple of things that we can do here for that speak to visibility. The first bit is actually kind of going back to these org units. So typically, one thing that I find a lot of my customers have challenges with is just managing multiple entities or departments within those entities. So with these filters on the left, this allows us to drill into, again, a particular entity, to compare two entities, to compare org units within those entities, right? So this gives you bird's eye view across the whole organization and lets you manage all those entities within one space. And the next bit with respect to visibility actually has to do with approvals. So a common issue that I see with customers in terms of visibility is just knowing where invoices are in the approval process and having insight into, who's approving invoices or how long it's taking folks to approve invoices and so on. So kind of going back to this approvals tab. So we'll actually give you metrics over how long your users are taking to approve your invoices, right? How long it's taking for specific users. We like to call this kind of our wall of shame. So we'll actually give you metrics on how long each user is taking, and that way you have an idea of which users are doing it quickly, which users are not doing it quickly, so that way you can figure out what's working and what's not working in the approval process. So the next bit that we're going to deal with in terms of visibility are reports. So this is where we can take advantage of our reporting functions on the left-hand side. So you'll see these custom filters. We can create as many custom filters as we'd like and run reports. After invoices actually are exported into Intacct, they're going to land in this archive tab, which is going to serve as essentially your digital filing cabinet. So if I wanted to run a report of all of my invoices that I've received from the vendor ABC Furniture, I would just create the filter on the left, use vendor as my criteria, add ABC Furniture. Let's throw another one in here too. We'll throw in Air Canada. And I want to see everything that's been fully paid to these vendors. So here's my set of invoices. I'm going to select the invoices that I want to include in the report and then generate a PDF. So here's what the report will actually look like. So you'll see the summary of all the invoices that we've paid to these two vendors, the coding, the dates, and we'll actually give you the invoice image, as well as the approval history, because we know auditors love to see the approval history. So this comes in handy when we're talking about data ownership and what actually happens to these invoices when you put them through the automation tool. Of course, the data is going into your Intacct, but this gives you a way to essentially run any report you could imagine, right? If we wanted to add a GL account even as one of the criteria, if we wanted to filter it further by saying match to a PO or expense, that gives us total access over all of our data and custom reports as opposed to your standard canned reports. I don't pretend to be a mind reader here, but I can tell what a lot of you are thinking. And one thing that we didn't really cover in the demo portion, and that's, this is all well and good, but adopting a new technology is a major disruption. So I think we've got time to address one bonus pain point here. And this is regarding integration. So fears over the ease of integration and data sync are a major roadblock in tech adoption. We've heard it dozens of times regarding AP automation. How long is this going to take till we're up and running? What's this going to look like for my IT team? Am I going to lose a load of data? And they're all legitimate concerns. So let's take a minute to see how Sage API Automation solved this problem. So Sage API Automation uses API direct integration to offer best-in-class integration. All your legal entities are accessible in one space. And you log in using your Sage credentials, and with a single click, perform either a full or partial sync with your Sage accounting software, in this case, Intacct. You can schedule the sync at multiple periods during the day to catch any updates and make sure no data is lost. And our customers have found that complete integration, workflow, training, and sync takes an average of just 6 hours. So in a little over half a day, you'll be up and running, so disruption to your workflows is super minimal. So I'll actually walk you through what the integration process looks like. So again, once our invoices are approved, they're going to flow to the export tab. And the reason we save this step for last is because it's super arduous and time consuming, involves a lot of data transfer. Just kidding. Actually, all we do is at this stage is we select the invoices for export, hit actions, and export data. And that is the sync over to Intacct. That's it. So like I said earlier, we can set up scheduled syncs to make these the actual sync over to Intacct happen without you having to click anything. But of course, you have the option to actually physically sync the data over. A couple of things to address with respect to integration with Intacct, maybe just before we get into the rest of the webinar here, is there's some key differences in different automation tools and how they speak to Intacct. For us, we use what's called an API direct integration. This is the least risky kind of integration. Basically means that when we pull over your vendors, your GLs, any list from Intacct, that's pulled over in real time. And when we sync information over to Intacct, that sync is much less risky than, let's say, a file-based integration or an integration that uses a middleware. So one thing to consider when you're evaluating solutions, those kind of 3 types of integrations. API direct, that's what we use, the least risky kind of integration. The second being a middleware, right, that's using some sort of sync tool. And then the third being a file-based, where you're actually importing and exporting CSVs. Because, right, the system can be amazing, but if it doesn't talk to your Intacct, then right, it's just another piece of clunky software. So that wraps up the integration bit. Again, super simple export data. So finally, let's take a look at how one of your peers has addressed these AP pain points with Sage API Automation. So the Canadian Safety Organization Ontario Trucking Association faced a number of AP pain points. Their AP processes were entirely manual, and when we asked the VP of Finance, Joanne Bennick, to list some of the inefficiencies that caused this, she joked, "How much time do you have?" So adopting Sage API Automation has allowed Joanne and her team to automate their manual data entry processes, saving 2 members of her staff 2 hours a day each. That's an extra 20 hours per week to spend on higher value tasks like vendor analysis, management, so on. Joanne described their former approval process as: we look at each invoice, manually stamp them, do the distribution, photocopy it, and then make sure that the approver sees it. Now, all invoices are emailed and automatically scanned into the system for a simple 2-stage approval process. Joanne has used Sage for many years and wanted an AP automation solution that can integrate quickly and easily with her established ERP. She says, "I wanted to make it as easy as possible for our team to adjust to a new tool and process." And Joanne tells us that Sage API Automation works like a charm, a turnkey solution that allows your team to quickly get up and running without disrupting the existing workflows. So the Ontario Trucking or OTS team are enjoying radically improved data access and visibility too. As Joanne tells us, quote, "All the information is there, invoices, payments, POs, they can verify everything. I just give them temporary access to Sage AP and they can review everything." So we'd love the chance to follow up with each and every one of you on pricing, implementation, any questions specific to your company's workflow. Drop a yes in the chat if you'd like to follow up with, like us to follow up with more info. And we'll go ahead and get into our Q&A portion. So again, feel free to drop any questions in the chat if you haven't already, and we'll get to those questions.
Okay, perfect. So the first question that we have here, give me 1 second. Our first question is, what types of payments are supported?
Okay, yeah. We didn't really cover the payments module today, but pretty much everything but Bitcoin. So we can do ACH, EFT, check, virtual credit card, and wire.
All right. Second question we have here is, what kind of support is included with the solution?
Yep. So it kind of depends. We have different tiers and things like that, but in general, every customer gets support included with their subscription, and so that means that a single point of contact when you submit a ticket or you have a question about let's say creating an approval channel, something like that. So every customer gets guaranteed support, included support. Where we have a little bit of differentiation is some customers opt to have support within 2 hours, things like that. The simple answer is support's included, and then there's different tiers of, if you want to have a kind of jump to the front of the line pass, that sort of thing.
All right. Another question I have here. How are you different from other automation tools?
It kind of depends on the tool, obviously. But I would say to highlight a few key differences. One that we kind of talked about at the end there is going to be integration. So with Intacct, right, we have the API. I know that with some of those solutions, not to name any specific organizations, I mean, you can do your research or check out some other demos. A lot of them will use what are called like file-based transfers, where they're using a template to get data in and out of Intacct. And then others, they may actually have an API integration, but they're leasing the integration from a third party. And so what that means is, for example, when you reach out for support, let's say there's an error or any sort of issue with how the systems are talking. When a company leases their integration from another company, that means there's just more cooks in the kitchen, right? You're not only dealing with the automation company, you're also dealing with the third-party integration provider. Whereas with us, we actually own the integration. So when you reach out to us, you're talking to the people who own the integration. So that's a big one with respect to integration. There's a couple others in terms of like approval channels, legal entity management, the actual data capture that we could maybe get into more as it pertains to a specific competitor. But we can save that for a more personalized demo.
Perfect. Next question. Do you offer expense reconciliation?
Yep. And actually, this kind of ties in well to the last question. So as you guys see on the left here, the 4 modules: POs, expenses, invoices, and payments. So we're a 360 solution, right? We have all parts of the AP workflow in one tool. These modules are, they're not put together through acquisition. They're not separate softwares. They're all in one tool. So yep, we offer credit card reconciliation, employee reimbursement, all in the same tool.
Great. That does conclude our question period.
Awesome.
Perfect. So just to kind of wrap this up, did you want to say any more few words, Matthew?
Yeah. So thanks everyone for joining for the demo today. My colleagues, we work with Intacct customers all the time. So, if what you saw today sparked any interest, reach out to us. Would love to get to know, your workflow better, the specific challenges of your organization, and show you how we can address those pain points.